array of events, social distancing, and maybe a little bit of sports. JB, I'll start off with you, man. How's life treating you?
Terribly. At the moment, I came back from Sweden to just a really.
There's no sound in the headphones.
Is it?
I don't hear any sound.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Now we're good.
There we are.
Take two.
Should we start that over?
Yeah, is that even possible?
Yeah, we'll just come back with it. Welcome to the Escape Pod. I'm joined by Johnny, JB, and Sean. We are excited to come to you from Southtown 100 Studios and airing in Pub Sports Radio. On this pod, we'll talk a little bit about current events, social distancing, and a little bit of sports. So, JB, I'm going to start off with you, man. How's life treating you in this quarantine era?
Terribly. I was in a pretty calm situation in Sweden like a week ago, and after the State Department upped that travel advisory that basically said get your ass home, I came back to shortages in stores and social distancing, and I came back to the madness. So it was a proper welcome home.
Awesome, Johnny. Do you currently believe in viruses or any of those things, or are we still Google translating what?
How many hours do we have?
How much time you got?
Not enough. Not enough.
Life for me is great because I move trucks is my secondary job. Flights are about $27. You can move them at any time. Gas is $1.59. I'm making a bunch of money. The people that are doing work for me, construction's a vital job. I'm starting a project. All the guys called me, hey, I'm going to work and I'll do it for a good price. So everything for me is rolling awesome. I talked to my brother more on text in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 2 years.
It has been interesting how it's kind of made the things that are important. I've had more phone conversations and checked in with people more in my life that I felt kind of bad that in other times I don't do that. But Sean, we're popping your Escape Pod cherry, man. First time on the show, man. How's life treating you? Sean Spain is the assistant coach at Churchill. Good dude, and almost swam across a continent, and also almost died.
Close one.
Yeah, we'll save that story for another day. But the quarantine it's not going too bad. Very fortunate to still be getting paid as a teacher. I know a lot of people can't say that right now, so very fortunate for that. But celebrated the 6-year anniversary with the girlfriend yesterday at
Congratulations.
the house.
Nice.
Did a little takeout, so it's kind of a different kind of thing, but I think it's a win. I think any guy, if you plan your anniversary, you kind of want to just stay at the house, little takeout,
Yep.
and then finish it up with some Xbox afterwards.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great anniversary, man. Very memorable. Y'all always say the coronavirus anniversary.
If your
man,
wife
it's a great
plays
thing.
Xbox with you, you have a keeper, sir.
But yeah, we were excited to be able to get back into this. We're gonna start getting into this every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So please get used to tuning in. We're gonna start with basic social events, things that matter, and then on this episode, we're gonna pan to, in about 20 minutes in, we all rewatched the 2006 Game 7 Dallas Mavs versus San Antonio Spurs. So if you're a big Spurs or Mavs fan and you're watching this later, you're welcome to fast forward to the 20-minute mark. But we'd encourage you not to. I think coronavirus is on everyone's minds. It's kind of the topic of how it's affecting you different ways. You're addressing it, different things you're doing. JB,
So,
what's life treating you like right now? What are you? It's on your mind?
Got a lot, man. I'm trying to. Every time, you're talking to somebody, if it's family or a friend or a girl or something like that, oh, yeah, what are you doing today? Well, it's the same thing. Spoiler, it's the same shit that I did yesterday and the day before that. So combination of trying to stay fit and read a little bit and write a little bit and not be a complete waste man for the stuff. So
that's another great JB's a great worker on these that we'll finish the podcast with all of our book recommendations, movies, TV shows. So if you're looking for new stuff to do, I've gotten into a pretty salty rhythm, like working from like 9 to 12. I do like a home YouTube workout from 12 to 12:30. And the one benefit is I've started to do, shout out to Yoga with Adrian on YouTube. Great stuff. I've been doing yoga every night, and I feel a little less inflexible. So So I'm sure there's people are going to be
You heard it here, ladies.
yoga with Adrian, flexibility, hamstrings and hips and lower back. But Sean, what are some of your thoughts on coronavirus and let's how it's going to affect culture going forward?
Ooh, nice. Great question. I think kind of the thoughts that come to mind when I'm thinking of coronavirus, hate to turn politics, hate to make a politics out of this pandemic, but
Do it.
Yeah, do
but
it.
just looking at the timeline of the leadership, I think it's described it poor at best. Just kind of underestimating the problem when we had the foresight to look at other countries such as China and Italy and stuff. So kind of disappointed. And I think moving forward, we haven't even began to see the worst of it. So.
Yeah, I know JB will have very little to say about this, but I think at a time like this, during a global pandemic, the key ingredient to your presidency not being textbook narcissism, I think would be an awesome quality to have. I think no matter if you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative, when your tweets are about how well you're doing stuff instead of, talking to families and people that are losing, I think that's something that on both sides of the aisle you can agree that it just seems like a reason why you don't want to have a reality show TV star as your president.
I disagree with all this, by the way.
For those that are first time listeners, throughout this podcast journey that we have over these next weeks, you'll find out that Johnny's a little bit of a wild card, and at this point, politically, I would say a wild card as well. So.
That's fair.
But yeah, for the sake of brevity and for the sake of our platform, I'll keep the commentary for another time.
Yeah.
On that, because it's you don't want to be enraged on your first podcast, so keep it chill.
I think it's interesting as well what like more of projecting what's going to happen going forward. This all seems like just generally smart things like washing your hands, making sure you're like wiping down surfaces and like being sensitive about like, hey, if I'm sick, I'm not going to go to work and I'm going to stay home. And like, these things are all probably like when we look back 40 years from now and our kids are talking about this, like, what do you mean? Why didn't they just social distance and like just hang out, like be intelligent with how they did things? I think it's going to be kind of interesting. Like hopefully all this dies down and we're safe. But I think the one of the things that people look back on this time, be like, why didn't people just stay home when they were sick anyways? Why didn't they do some of these health things? I think it's gonna be super interesting what people look back 20 years from now.
I was kind of messing with like I said, I've been living in Stockholm for like the last 6.5 months. So I kind of, Swedes are great people. Shout out Sweden, by the way, but great people, but not the most open right away, and definitely fans of personal space. So I was joking with them when
They just went about their life.
Yeah, like I was joking with them. I said, you guys have been preparing for this your whole life. Like you just pretty much just don't go out as much. But as far as the social distance, they were already on top of it.
Italy was oppositely preparing by double cheek kissing, hugs. See grandma, pinch a cheek, give me a hug. Oh, I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes today. That's okay for you, I
mean, going back from what Sean was saying, you look at I think government responses. You look at a place like South Korea, and you see what someone who's on top of things that like place like and we're a little different bag. But you see what the countries that took this very seriously,
that's
early.
A dense population too, though, and they've handled. I think they get the A.
They do get the A draft rating.
If there's an A on the draft rating, South Korea gets it.
They're the Greg Popovich
There's one problem with this theory, though.
It's not a theory.
No.
We didn't come up with this.
No, wait a minute. What you're saying is the countries that did the right things have had a much better outcome, right?
You give yourself the best chance of having a good outcome.
Let me bring up case A for me. Mexico, 1 week ago, had soccer games, concerts, did no social distancing, had cruise ships visiting, is an international city packed with 30 million people, one of the biggest cities in the world. Yesterday, Mexico had 28 deaths. Today, Mexico had 29. So are they superhumans, or is there something going on in Mexico? Now, I'm not saying, I know they're not testing, so the numbers of how that actually have it, but you can't hide deaths from this thing. The symptoms are too easy to diagnose. Loss of smell and taste, chest. It's a regular flu. The rest of the symptoms of fever. How is Mexico with 30 million people in that city just magically?
I think it's kind of too early to tell. So it could get really bad there. But I mean, when you talk about the U.S., you've got major international points of entry. So it's not that people don't fly into Mexico City, but like New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta.
Why is London and New York so different? London, are they just social distancing that much better? Even though I saw pictures of people crammed on subways, they have almost nothing compared to New York.
I don't know. Maybe the government there was a bit more prepared than
the
administration here.
They probably honestly did better early than New York.
I got kind of set off the other day because no one likes to wake up to bad news or wake up to reading something negative right away. But it's like the very first thing that I read,
like 900
is from an article from the State Department website that says in February, like early February, like the 4th or so, we sent 18 tons of PPE, like PPE, personal protective equipment to China.
Yeah,
which there's nothing wrong with helping a country in need, but it's like you send 18 tons of it, and at the same time that the State Department is sending that shipment, Trump's calling it a hoax at that time.
Yeah,
publicly calling it a hoax. And then what do we have a shortage of in New York and on the West Coast? What is there a shortage of? The same stuff you sent 18 tons of, and you were saying that it wasn't a big deal. So it's like, if somebody wants to, it's not making it political to say that the federal government was not prepared.
I think that's the thing, is that for most of us that just like want general well-being, I don't think it's like, because there's conservatives and liberals, like I think the biggest is when you start like ignoring your scientists. I think that's when you should have a real problem. When people are like saying your scientists don't know anything, when you start ignoring the experts in fields, that's when, as a society, we should be like, what are we doing here? Yeah. That the experts, I listened to podcasts of experts, and they were predicting exactly what happened. This wasn't something that's my thing. To me, this really isn't political.
Well, no,
it's the fact that scientists were ignored early, and now we're paying late. I think that's what it comes down to.
Why have scientists on panels when you can have Mike Pence and Ben Carson? Like, don't worry about it.
You have the one problem is that these same scientists and experts were the same people telling us that there was yellow cake, going to be a nuclear bomb, and weapons of mass destruction.
These are media. These are different scientists, I think.
But the same people pushing a narrative. And I'm not saying this isn't a real thing by any stretch. Okay,
but pushing a narrative is a dangerous way of saying a virus has. I just think that's you got to be
happening. I agree. You do know that 12,000 people died in 2009 from the other one, and we're only at like 5,000 here in America. We could be
stay tuned
peaking off at some point. It could get worse. I'm not saying this isn't a real thing, by the way. I'm just saying I'm not believing everything the media says, because we've been at war in Iraq for 19 years.
We're not addressing the media. I think it's scientists is what I would like to trust. I don't trust the media any more than you, experts. But I would same experts in the field
that told us weapons of mass destruction and all these things.
It's different. That's apples to oranges, man.
I mean, the people that are these people are experts in global pandemics. That's who they are. Like Anthony Fauci has nothing to do with trying to figure out WMD. So I just feel like it is the perfect apples to oranges.
Well, no, but nobody wants everything's become political, and it's like in a normal world, in a normal like rational world, if an administration 2 years ago cuts an entire like pandemic task force and cuts the shit out of their funding. In a real rational world, you can point a finger at that, and it's not a political thing. You can say, well, what the hell is this? And you've actively contributed to American deaths. But it's like now, because of how polarized everything is, it's like, if I'm on this side, I'll point it out because it's convenient. And if I'm on this side, I'm going to completely ignore that they cut that entire.
Why is tobacco not illegal? 300,000 deaths, 380,000 deaths in America.
That's because it's optional.
Yeah, it's.
You can self-quarantine. The older people could go quarantine and not be around and not get it, and have a system to get them the food. And the people that want to go out and have the freedom to work, I'm not
going to risk that, man.
Yeah, it's
risking enough with you guys right now.
Yeah, it's picking an economy.
Do y'all know what the actual risk is? The actual risk, if you get it right now, you have a 97%
See, this is
9% chance of surviving.
this
Or
is the
you can-
argument
or
I'm
you
really
can
not a
say
big
it-
fan of. Let me just like
Or you wait, or you can
because this
say it
is a
really
s-
scary and say
It's a selfish.
it's 10 times worse than the regular flu. Either you have a 99% chance of surviving, or it's a 99.9% chance of surviving.
Okay. All right. So the
So-
counter to that is if I get that and I have my 99% survival rating, I am not going to die from the coronavirus. But when I go check on my
1%
parents this
chance.
weekend, and my dad has type 2 diabetes, who I love and I care about, it's a very selfish thing to say, you know what, old people, go lock yourselves in a room. I'd like to just live my life. I think that is personally, I think that is because
When you
they
can't
have to get groceries,
and you
they
can't
have to do
control
things, like, no.
who other people interact with either. So it's
Correct.
just like if you if
Yeah,
you
you
said,
don't know the wild card that goes and does something that you didn't even know
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
No, but you minimize risk by doing this.
I'm saying
Like
I've been
like
home.
that's-
I've been home almost 2 weeks and haven't seen my parents and haven't seen my
It's hard.
sister because of that reason. And
Yep.
it's like, okay, they're not super old, but I mean they're middle aged. Hi, mom. Hi, dad. They're middle aged, and it's just like, why? If they're at a higher risk, why the fuck am I going to go
Exactly.
be around them when,
Right.
if it's a risk?
Yeah.
So my kind of counter to that a little bit would be, so let's say the cure is to keep doing what we're doing. 6 months, a year of complete lockdown, economy destroyed, people don't have the means to go take care of their parents. In 2 months, people living off of what, 2 weeks of savings. How are they going to be able to, how are the poor people in America going to be able to go help
Okay, the
their
counter to
elderly?
that is if we all go about our business and just do that, we will overwhelm our healthcare system, and to the point where we'll go into a recession anyways. And so this way we're trying to do is elongate the bell curve. We're trying to slow down the spread of the virus to the point where our medical system, who, as we've talked about before, is so inequipped. And then you talking about just like basic human decency. You know, our president acting like the nurses and doctors are stealing stuff. Like that's the stuff, like you can't, that's not a political thing. That's just
Yeah.
wrong.
I think I think another attack like on common working people, just like you're talking about the nursing staff and the PPE, is kind of like this weird expectation that we're supposed to have 3 to 6 months savings in case of emergency, but the minute these Fortune 500 companies have one bad month,
They're gonna get a
the
bailout.
government's here.
It's there to
they're on
save
their
them.
knees
Yeah.
begging for socialism to beg out. It's not fair. It's
No.
not fair.
And
It's
that's-
socialism for the rich.
No,
is
no,
what it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So socialism is wrong if it goes to the people. If it goes to corporations, if it goes to billionaires, then it's fine. And that, I think, that's probably going to be a huge takeaway from this. Whenever it ends, if it could end tomorrow, I'd be happy. But if it goes on for months, that's going to be one of the huge takeaways. I think is people are going to start to recognize that, you know, this shit of how are we going to pay for it? It only exists when the benefits go to the people. If it comes to corporations, if it comes to the military, nobody's saying how we're going to pay for it. Nobody asked how that 1.5 trillion was plugged into Wall Street, was wired. Nobody worries about that. So
Well, and some
think-
of it's already going to be heading overseas too, to help banks overseas, the way it did in 2008.
Yeah.
Billions went to banks overseas to help them stay solvent. I'm like, that's wow, really?
Yeah,
We're just going to send money to banks overseas?
No, but meanwhile, like stimulus bills are getting stalled and underfunded because politicians don't like the idea of a working person making, you know, maybe a few bucks more than their, you know, what they would make working for 4 months.
Yeah.
That idea disgusts them, and it's just like the idea
Talking
of
about Lindsey Graham.
the idea of a working person getting some relief during a pandemic that happens to amount to a little bit more
Yeah.
over a minimum wage.
I heard
It absolutely terrifies them.
Well, let's somewhat move on, just shift to, as we start talking about the sports before we move into the Mavs Spurs thing. How do you guys, I think one of the more interesting portions of this, basically all of us being sports enthusiasts, sports having affected life, how do sporting events change? It's weird for me to think like in 3 months that I'm going to go to a Spurs game surrounded by 60 strangers, and like every time I hear a cough, I'm like, I think it's going to start to change. I think it's going to be interesting. What are some of y'all's thoughts on how sporting events are going to move forward? What the timetable you think there are? Just what are your general thoughts on sports
NBA's still trying to do their
post coronavirus?
season. That's been talked about. They're literally the Bucks are preparing and I don't know if they have inside information, they are preparing as if this season's going to happen. Now, if you were the number one seed and you think you're really going to win this year, you don't screw around. They probably are the team that's, full speed ahead. The worst team, the Knicks, are like, oh, hell no. Let's just, who cares? Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a lost season. Like just talking
I
about
think
a lost season.
I mean, it's
insane.
never happened. And I mean, money still makes the world go round, even during a pandemic. So it's like with this, you know how it was being proposed during the when the NCAAs weren't canceled yet. You were thinking about doing the games with only essential personnel and only like limited TV people. I could see them doing that for the league because there's enough money involved to where they could say, okay, everybody on the staff has to be tested and cleared.
Yeah.
Everybody involved has to be tested and cleared, but we can run these games.
Yeah.
And
isolate for 14 days, get tested, show up.
Yeah.
Well, and basketball's the best place for that. You talk about a football game. Football getting 2 teams, 2 staffs, like that's hundreds of tests.
No.
Basketball, you could get
I mean,
25, 30 tests.
That's
and
30
you can
players.
Get refs, players,
Yeah.
coaches,
That's
essential
30
personnel. Like
30 players max, and they probably, I mean, you don't even have to bring the guys that are
Go to reps.
IR or whatever. You bring the essential
Yeah.
coaches, you bring the guys that are suiting up, and that's
what
it.
what would the ratings be? Think about what would the playoff
man.
ratings be? This like when here's the other, like I've thought of both sides, and I've heard this
Yeah.
somewhere. I wish I could give the source. If the season got canceled, think about how crazy it'd be if Golden State made another run next year and they kept their final streak alive. As bad of
Oh,
a season they
yeah.
had, if it just canceled out, everyone comes back healthy.
Yeah.
Like the Warriors picked the best time to
Yeah.
like think about how crazy that would be if it was just like that.
It's analytics, man. They might have saw
just
this.
knew.
They might have saw this coming.
They're
man.
way ahead of time. Isn't that what
Yeah.
their GM is always talking about?
Hey, they got a big Chinese community there. Maybe someone told them.
It's heads up.
If you guys, for basketball purposes, and then just to wrap up like the season, if the season did end today, say they said in 2 months the playoffs start, who's your MVP right now? Am I wearing the guy's jersey?
Johnny.
Yeah.
Who do you got, man? Who's the
Man, it's
MVP?
tough. It's tough to go against Giannis because of their record, but Leonard's, it's tough. I would say Giannis.
LeBron.
I'm vote number 2 for LeBron, man.
LeBron.
I am vote number 2.
That's it. I gotta
It's
start
tough
that.
when you have, my opinion, healthy 82 game, nothing wrong with him. The best player in the NBA all around is Anthony Davis. Just talent, defense, offense, shoots the 3, pass, everything.
Yeah.
He's like Giannis, but like doesn't have quite in the guard. He's like a
I-
big, but
I-
he's just so good.
I
So how's
know
LeBron,
That's
the
been
MVP
8 years.
either
That's
way?
been 8 years running, and I think that's a really fun conversation. I think Anthony Davis he's incredible, but I think his combined parts aren't as big to the whole. Like when you come, like he's not a playmaker. He doesn't create shots like Giannis. Giannis creates shots for 4 other guys on the court every time down. LeBron completely changed. You look at the splits when LeBron's on and off,
Defense.
and you look at the splits when Anthony Davis is on and off. Like I think I would put Kawhi over Anthony Davis for sure as far as a player, just because of what he does. I'm not saying Anthony Davis's pieces aren't
Yeah.
greater, but as an overall player, I think Anthony Davis is borderline top 5. Like I think he's number 4, number 5 out of those.
No,
key
the
guys.
Lakers for sure have 2 of the top 5 best players in
Yes.
the world, but it's just with
And I
the way the NBA does it all the
Yeah.
time is like best player on the best team. So it's like
Yeah,
Giannis has that argument in his favor, but it's like
Well,
if
look
you
at his second fiddle. His second fiddle is Middleton.
Whew, who's not bad. though.
LeBron, Anthony Davis, Kawhi, Paul George, who I think is underrated. I love Paul
LeBron's
George.
also playing in a tougher conference though.
Yes, much tougher, and
Yeah.
it's I think it's you have to also weigh in. It's much harder to win a back-to-back MVP. Like I think LeBron's got he went from their team was not very good last year, obviously basically a different team, but he's kind of built that team back up. It's in LA. The
Yeah.
fact that he's got the 1 seed, they're battling the second best team I think in the league is in the same city as them.
Well, I mean, just people that really play basketball and really coach basketball. Like when you see the impact that guy has on the floor,
It's incredible.
it's like he could, if he played a whole game and just theoretically you said, okay, you're not allowed to score the whole time. For sure, he's got 20 assists.
He's
and
the
for
leader in assists this year.
Yeah.
I think
and
it's
just
LeBron's MVP to lose. Like, what more if you're not a LeBron? Like, what more does he have to do?
Well, the age, this, I think he could win it and will win it. Kind of what you're saying, and the sentimentality. This is the last year. This has to be about the. It's not going to happen again next year. This has to be the last year
Giannis,
that he has a chance to do it.
The Giannis debate is, if you look at like analytics, the analytics guys are so in love with. I mean, Giannis's win share, Giannis's efficiency. He's a top 5 defensive player and offensive player. Like, I don't want to downplay what Giannis is doing. I think the dark horse right now, I hate to say it too, is like I think Luka's in the conversation. What he's doing with the Mavs, I think you throw him in that top 4 conversation. What he's done there.
Yeah, I'm here for this.
So
the only thing that hurt him a little bit when when he was gone for a little bit, Porzingis killed it and they won. So it wasn't like all of a sudden, like if LeBron goes, they're 500.
The summary of what the guys are talking about here is that the Mavs are tough this year.
I like the Mavs this year.
Hey, but a lot of people don't think about this. So like with Giannis, like, so with the wins, you can definitely say like, okay, look at his supporting staff. What's he doing? Who's supporting him? If you look at LeBron, for him to be putting up the numbers he's putting up with that talent, so it's like anybody who's ever played at a good level.
Who's their third best player?
Well, but let me.
Kuzma?
This is the
He's
point.
still putting up those numbers with guys around him, like with dudes around him.
That's why, though, I think the Lakers team doesn't perfectly fit. That's why I think you like we're going to talk about this Mavs team, and this Mavs team didn't have stars around them, but it was the perfect build of a team. You had the guys who knew their role, and you had your alpha. Like, that's what the Bucks are. The Bucks, and right now they haven't figured out how to completely flip that into playoffs, but they have perfect fits, and we overthink how many stars teams have sometimes. That right now, it's nice to have here's the first guy, then it's the second guy, here's the third, and they all know how to fill their roles. We watched Toronto have 7-8 basketball players that everyone knew is what their role was, and when it's winning time, that guy on your jersey, he's going to get the ball. And so I think team building and having stars on your team are two totally different things. So we have to talk about that a little bit. Like, yes, the Bucks don't have the star power, but that Buck system, there's not a better spot for Giannis to play on. They've put it to where it's perfect for him.
Well, that kind of makes that potential matchup cool as hell, though, because it's more of a star-studded, flashy, like just dominant ass primary lineup against a team that's been strategically built around Giannis and guys that do their job.
Hey, where would y'all rank if you put Toronto in the West Coast? Where do you think they would be sitting
right now?
Ahead of Dallas, right?
6th.
Yeah, like
ahead of Dallas, though. Like,
dude, Kyle Lowry, man.
I say that with a grudge, but yeah,
you got to show Kyle Lowry some love. That guy, I hate him, but he's kind of
he's tough though.
He is, man. Like here's what, and this is what one thing I got to show love to Adam Silver, like changing the NBA playoff rule stuff. Like when you see Kyle Lowry being one of the 3-4 most important players in the fourth quarter of that game, it just shows the competitive dog nature of him. I love that. He took 2 charges at the end of an All-Star game, hit a big shot. Kyle Lowry is just one of those guys that you want on your team.
I agree. He's like, if you go play at an open run, you don't have to like someone's game to recognize that I want to play with that guy, or hey, I respect. We're gonna have to play hard to beat that guy. Yeah. So you don't. His game isn't super flashy, and I don't think there's too many people outside of Toronto that would describe him as their favorite player. But he's a dog though.
I think DeRozan was kind of hurting him a little bit. DeRozan would disappear in games. So when your best guy disappears and then all of a sudden you're supposed to be, maybe he doesn't have it. But now that he had Kawhi and has these other guys, he can just be him.
I just didn't have to worry about DeRozan disappearing. I didn't like 2 guys that exist off dribble pull-ups to be on the same team. If they're apart, then it's cool. I'm sure they're good friends.
The Spurs then?
I like Pop, but yeah, I'm a Mavs fan. Let it be known.
Well, speaking of the Mavs, let's parlay this into our classic. We got to hang out for a little bit at Johnny's spot right down the road, and I really enjoyed watching this game. This was JB had called it, and I thought it was a great comment that this is one of the best series of that decade. It's vintage Tim, it's vintage Dirk. I'll just kind of have opening statements for everybody. My person, and I'll be short on this. I know JB and I thought the exact same thing, but the person that just jumped off the screen to me was Josh Howard. I was talking. I called my brother, and we were going over his career and talking about how he had a very similar build up in stats to Kawhi, his first 6 years. And you talk about, before his time, and he got in trouble and things like changed when he started talking about weed, and he he got talked to, he got filmed saying he didn't do the pledge, and 10 years from now, no one cares about
that.
but it changed everything. And he was just one of those guys that, like, he was a dog. He could compete. He got to the rim at will. He scored 9 of their first 11, and he just popped off the screen. Just some of the little things that he could do.
For me, it's the same, man. I watched that, and I mean, as a Mavs fan growing up, I knew about Josh Howard, and I liked Josh Howard. I thought he was great, but like, after all this time, you watch the game, and it's like, holy shit, this guy was this guy was the second best player on a finals team. And it's like, his career didn't have the same longevity as a lot of other guys do, but talent wise and playing both sides of the ball like that was the second best player on an elite team for a handful of years.
Was he there 2011?
No.
He got
traded 2010 to that
Wizards
to the Wizards right after Gilbert Arenas, the gun going off in the locker room. So that was a great
another big shout out would be Jason Terry, man. I mean, that
Spurs killer.
Just gamer. Like that's the way you could describe him, and I think that's why he stayed in the league, because it's not because of his size, it's not because he's locking guys up. It's a solid pro, and when it comes down to a big game, he's a gamer. He's the guard equivalent of like a Robert Horry, you could say. Like, he's just a shot hitter.
Who was disappointing in that game.
I'd like to get back to Josh Howard eventually, but since you moved it to Jason Terry, I'll get killed for this in San Antonio. But I'm watching that series, and as a Spurs fan, personally, I would have loved to have flipped Jason Terry and Tony Parker. Like, he drives me crazy in series. Like, I think, like, watching the way. I think Tony Parker is one of the more overrated guys. Like,
Sean cringed when you said that.
I believe that, and I'm sorry. It's just Jason Terry. You never double off him. Where Tony Parker was when they doubled Tim, the open guy was always Tony. They threw it right back out to Tony, and where Jason Terry was hugged up the whole time.
I'll let Sean take this.
I'm not saying he's a better player. No, I just want to say that I think he might have been a better fit. If you switch those guys, I think the Spurs win that series.
I think Sean will agree with this, and it makes me mad. When Tony Parker slowed down, he became an elite three-point shooter, like for the last 3 or 4 years. Imagine if he had put that work in.
But it was never all together
when he had the speed. You know what I mean?
But that's fair.
Well, it's going to take time I think you have a huge advantage to be able to see that, like, when I have a point guard in the game right now, like in today's NBA, you got to be able to hit the 3-point shot, right?
Right.
Back in the time that when we're watching a 2006 game, like, Parker was he wasn't extremely impressive, but when you look at the box score at the end of the game, he had 20 points. He shot over 500 from the field.
8 assists somehow.
What I would argue is the spacing in which Parker, like, passing that thing down to Duncan and cutting, and Parker's hanging out at the short corner. That's where it becomes kind of iffy for me. Like, what's Parker doing for you down there at that spot? And when they go small, if they're big, the Spurs, that's like that'd be a Rasha Nesterovic, or that'd be who else was on the bench
that was interesting. Sean and I talked about that, man. That was they didn't play. The Mavs actually played bigger than the Spurs, and the Mavs back.
Traditionally, they were worried about playing small to the Mavs.
Yeah, and the Mavs back then, especially. I mean, even now, kind of like they're a jump shooting team, and they were for quite a while, and it was like they were playing with Dirk and Dampier. So it's like you've got 2 7-foot guys. And San Antonio didn't none of those guys. Yeah, Jop played.
Horn, 6'10".
Jop and Van Horn both played too. And
Dampier was huge.
And it was like the Spurs tried to kind of small ball it, and that was interesting to me.
Yeah, Bruce Bowen is the 4 a lot of that game, or whoever you want to call it. But yeah, my only thought with that, and I said I'm not saying that Terry had a better career. I just think Terry gets hugely underrated, and Tony Parker gets overrated at times. Where Jason Terry. That same game that Tony had 22, Jason Terry had 27, and not one time did teams rotate off of him. He got 27 the hard way. He got 2 or 3 like big late shot clock, dribble pull-ups, right in guys' grills. I just want to show love to him. I don't want this to be a Tony Parker, but I just think Jason Terry is one of those guys where we talked about all-time great role players. I think you just got to bring that guy up in the first 2 minutes of that conversation, because the clutchness of his game.
This will kind of make your point a little bit. People forget Speedy Claxton early on in the Spurs championships played in the fourth quarters over Parker because he was
okay.
hitting 15
Well,
footers.
that was back when
I mean-
people. That's back when people were going under screens and giving
Yeah.
Parker 15 footers. Like
And
they
late,
had, they
Patty
had,
Mills
they
was
had,
the most
Claxton was
important guard.
automatic. You go watch that. I thought Speedy Claxton was like a 60% shooter, but then I went back. But just in those playoffs, it was like I remember I was like, this guy doesn't miss, man.
Well,
and
it's
that's
just
why Parker was sitting.
yeah. Well, it's just hard for me to watch, and Sean makes a good point that analytics change things, but it's just hard for me to watch Tony Parker shoot 35-40% from mid range when Mike Finley's basically shooting the same percentage from three, and I'm like, gosh, if we could just have one more guy that's like. If we got one more point for every one of those misses, like or makes, it would be it just knowing that how analytics work now. It just kind of drove me crazy. And Tony Parker is going to be a Hall of Famer, and which is fine, which is good.
Sure.
But
Really
Jason Terry's
critical.
probably not, and that's hard for me to. That's hard for me to be
Yeah.
able to. That Jason Terry's career, and he was a big game guy. Like you can
Lasted a
talk,
long time.
you can list the amount of big series Jason Terry's has had on two hands, and you might need to use some toes.
He's a gamer, man. I told him I met him a few years ago. I was like, man, I was a big fan when I was a kid and stuff. And I said, man, pulling up with the like a right-handed pull up, going to his right. I don't know if there was a better guy in the league
It's
at doing
awkward,
that. Like
man.
really. But yeah, that's for the guys we're talking about from the Mavs. Like he and Josh Howard were the two
Josh
were the
Howard,
two
man.
big
Yeah,
pieces.
let's go back
after
to him
Dirk.
for a little bit. Yeah.
They're the two big pieces after Dirk, and it's just like one ended up having a really long career, and the other one was a bit shorter. But both, I mean, that just shows you like how good guys at that level are. Because
Let me ask you, speaking of Josh Howard, where does he fit in today's game? Because I think that he
Great.
was
Perfectly.
Great.
really good for that, but he'd have to shoot it a little bit better.
Yeah.
right?
I
So-
think he wasn't
so
he
what
like what's his 3-point percentage?
he wasn't
fast.
all. He was a bit streaky. He
Yeah.
wasn't awful though. I think he was in the
33?
Yeah, he's in the low 30s. But
What I looked up with him, and like I said, he was the one I went on a rabbit hole, and I read 3 different articles. There's an article about him on Grantland. If anyone's looking for things, like it was an incredible. It's a long piece. I read the entire thing. Like he never quite had the work ethic. Was what the like. I think
Yeah.
if you give him. If you put him in this day and age where everyone I feel like is working, there's just not a lot of guys that are in this league that aren't grinding, and you're kind of like the status quo is you have to work. I think you put him in this day and age, like he's that guy who he's already gritty. He already can get wherever he wants. He's in the gym 30 minutes a day working on basic corner threes.
Hey,
like
what,
just
what
so
if
I mean,
the
I
Spurs,
think he's
what if the Spurs had drafted him and he's here in the Spurs with that coaching at that time? And I'm not dogging the Spurs. I mean the Mavs coaching.
I agree.
But just imagine, we all know Duncan smokes, so that would have been kind of cool and kept on the cool, and they would have made him work, and you'd have been around all those guys.
That's the thing is that I think it sounds weird to say when you're talking about the best league in the world, but like there's not. I mean, not even half the teams in the league they don't keep a coach long enough, and they don't keep staffs long enough to say this is our culture. So it's like at that time, Dallas got rid of Avery Johnson like a year after the finals.
After being the coach of the year,
Right.
And then
And so
his career 3-point shooting percentage was 33%.
Yeah.
So
Not-
I mean,
it
you're
would've
getting a
been
point
better
per
now.
shot.
He-
You're getting a
yeah.
point per shot.
yeah,
He's getting up to 35, 36 in this day and age.
But
Yes.
that's the thing though, is if you plug a guy like that into the Warriors right now with Kerr,
oh,
the
yeah.
Spurs
Yeah.
right now
Yep.
with Pot, like if you put them
Celtics.
into
Put him
you
with
plug
the Celtics.
you plug them into a place that's committed to a culture, then it's a different player. And it's kind of like what playing, I guess, with LeBron has done for JaVale McKee. Like when you go to a place where there's expectations and it's like you're either going to do this or you're out, then it
Well,
changes guys a
This
bit.
is a little bit off topic, but the guy, the LSU quarterback, everybody's saying, do not go to the Bengals. Like literally,
Joe Burrows.
sit out because you're going to be destroyed there. Like Dalton was like, I'm not playing. He's like, I'll retire before I go. If you go somewhere like that, your career could be ruined.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a terribly kept secret of how players try and go where they'll get developed. Like I think the Spurs people get excited, but I would say that the Mavs were a pretty solid organization too. I mean,
Cuban on. They've been
I think they've been. I don't think that's a bad place. From all I read, that he had a really good relationship with Avery, and then Rick Carlisle is I think a top 20 coach of all time. I mean, so you really can't. They've had pretty great institutional integrity in their organization too. So I think that what if is a little bit harder. It sounds like if he got put in a position where he had to work, he got. That's the only thing that I would say is like, what if that might be one of like a Dirk conversation is what if that you had a little more outspoken leader? Like Dirk is such a, and Tim Duncan's the same way. You have two guys who just put in the work and don't say a whole lot, but you throw him with the guy like, you throw him with the guy that's a little more outspoken.
Give him
Yeah.
LeBron.
Give him a guy who
LeBron
forces
type
him.
guy.
Yeah, I think that might change something. Be interesting. Let's talk about you. Want to
Well,
stay
well,
with
I was going to say, speaking of what if scenarios, as stoked as I was to watch that game back in 2006 and to watch it over at
Yeah.
Sean's house the other day, it was like, speaking of what ifs, what if Ginobili
Doesn't foul.
what if he doesn't foul? So like rotate late if you want, but just get
Let
the
him
hell
score
get
the
the hell
two.
out of the way and give him the two. But that foul, and I mean Dallas dominated the overtime, and it's like
Yes, I did.
that foul.
I
It
think
might be the difference between San Antonio having another ring right now.
I don't know how y'all felt, but I remember live as soon as we hit that three, Manu hits the first three, I thought the Spurs are going to win. And then live, I remember how disappointed I was, and again watching this replay, that Tim Duncan isn't the person that they wrote in the last playthrough. That they end up doing a Manu ISO from the top. That it was just, to me, it was such an interesting mirror where the last play for the Mavs was a smart little rub clear out for your best player, your top 15 player of all time. Get Dirk the ball. Dirk does what great players do. And then we have Tim Duncan, in my opinion, the greatest power forward of all time.
And they had
he
played through him the entire game up to that point.
At that point, he had 39 points and 15 boards. So if he gets the shot, there's a chance he gets tipped in. He's been getting foul calls all game.
Yeah.
Like, for him not to get a touch, for Manu to take a semi-contested runner, I hated it the first time I watched it, and I think I hated it even more the second time.
The thing that I hated was a veteran like Finley, when they ran the three-pointer for him in the corner, had a guy flying at him
And
he
didn't try and draw the
jumps
foul.
He jumps
Yeah.
up in there and does a double
So
clutch.
that's the modern
sitting there
day.
watching that going,
Everyone draws the foul.
Yeah, or pump fake, take a step over, hit a wide open, shoot a wide open three. He did like something like a ninth grade girl would do in a corner. I'm sitting there going, I couldn't believe it. I was amazed to watch that.
The biggest difference though, like obviously when you get down to the end of the game, one possession can make the difference. But it's like if you're comparing the two teams in that game and in that series, like the bench was so huge. So like Dirk and Duncan are both going to be in legend mode regardless, and starting lineups are going to feel each other out and do their thing. But like when it came to the bench, I think anytime they brought the ticker up at the bottom, it was so lopsided with Dallas just getting more.
Spurs finished 2 points off the bench, man.
Are you kidding me?
2 points off the bench. Yeah.
I couldn't believe I saw Van Exel so much.
Brent Berry plays 17 minutes and only shoots the ball twice.
Yeah.
2 big brick threes too.
Yeah,
He jumped
doesn't.
up.
Yeah, nothing. Just
It
shoots
was-
the ball twice.
Van Horn got
Jeez,
it.
Van Horn hits two huge
but
threes. And right after an air ball. He missed the shot
yes.
before by 5 feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
When he shot the second one, I was like, "What's he do?" I was like, "Oh, okay." He
Good
went in.
God.
And then he
For-
hits another one.
For anyone listening and or watching that might just be sitting at home thinking, what in the hell game are these guys talking about? we will put a YouTube link up later. That's Corona's terrible, but one thing that it has done is it's prompted YouTube people to upload full games to YouTube, so people, basketball junkies like ourselves can go on YouTube and find almost any old game you want.
Speaking of the bench, the other guy who really impressed me, and it was in limited time, he's older by then, but Jerry
Hit
Stackhouse.
some big shots.
Jerry Stackhouse would just,
Big.
when they needed it, they, like when Terry was out, it seemed like he would catch that ball in that mid-range. He'd put his back to you and he'd shoot that
Back-
shot, and
back Parker down.
he would back people down, and he would just turn around and he knocked down some huge shots. And like to Sean's point, the bench was this Mavs team. I like to compare, like they kind of reminded me of the Raptors team last year, that they had 5 perimeter guys. They had Dirk, Howard, Terry, Harris, Stackhouse, and you can even add Van Horn, and then you had Diop, or you had Haywood.
Dampier.
Dampier,
Haywood was later.
and those two guys would be in the dunk spot. So they had 8 different guys who would contribute on offense, where it was just kind of like, okay, hopefully Manu, hopefully Tim Duncan does something.
Manu 6th man?
Manu started this game.
He started.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Manu started, it kind of, because
And that was one of the years, and I mean San Antonio, like in later years, was a lot deeper. Previous years and later years, they were a lot deeper at the 2 spot, and that's kind of why they were able to bring Manu off the bench. But there, I mean, in 06, it seemed like they were really thin at that spot.
Well, Van Exel played like 14 minutes, and I don't think he did one real positive thing. I saw him like miss some shots.
He passed on a few that a regular
Probably
Nick
should have
Van
taken.
Exel shoots 100% of the
It
time. That's the
was-
guy that scored 10,000.
Yeah.
We actually got a Sean and I play a ton of bar trivia, as you know. Nick Van Exel won us a game one time because the bonus, it was like a tiebreaker bonus question that said, get whoever guesses the closest to the total points that Nick Van Exel scored in his career. And, you know, most of the nerds in the bar are like,
Oh,
who the
crap.
hell's Nick Van Exel? And then the rest of them are like, well, he was a bench guy for the Spurs that time. And it's like, this is a guy that on other teams,
Was a
and when
bucket.
he was with the Lakers, he's a bucket. And it's like over 10,000 career points. Like, you know,
Yeah.
check my resume.
And then going back to the Spurs, I had watched last weekend. I watched the 03 Nets versus Spurs series where they're playing Kmart, J Kidd, all those guys.
The quadruple double game.
The
Jefferson.
quadruple double game.
Quadruple
Yeah,
double.
that was fun. It was a fun game to watch, and you got to show Pop love on like the way he was able to change the culture of the team. Like you watch the 04, and then you watch not that long ago. It was teams in the post. It looked almost like a 90s game where like the spacing was like they figured out spacing. They were playing Tim and Dave, and if Dave wasn't in, they were playing 46-year-old Kevin Willis, and it was just like,
Who was good.
yeah,
still, man.
he was good, but like it was one of those where it's like, okay, if you played Kevin Willis less, we could give Tim Duncan more space, and it seems like no one can stop this guy. Let's try and just that they couldn't figure out that if you just give space around Tim Duncan, no one guy can guard him, and he's one of the greatest passing bigs of all time. And so, like, if you just put four guys who can kind of make a shot around Tim, like you figured it
Give
out.
him a stretch forward.
Is that series? I mean, we're all sadly old enough to be able to answer this with some accuracy. Is that the best? Is that the best series of the best playoff series of the 2000s? So from 2000 to 2010.
Which
so
one?
Oh
the
man.
Spurs Mavs,
I'm having a tough time. So my favorite,
or the
Spurs
best that you can
Phoenix.
remember, anyway.
Oh,
What?
Spurs Phoenix was some,
Uh,
some
that-
weirdly good.
That's what I think.
Fights.
Duncan averaged like 34. Amari
The-
averaged like 38.
Yeah.
the one is like I was young enough to be like, I guess still a kid there. The one that sticks out to me the most is that Lakers Kings series. Like that's the one that it was just
Yep.
it's almost like it's one of those where you remember where you were. You kind of
It's like
remember.
it's like the making or breaking of the whole dynasty thing with the Lakers is just a shot or two difference between the Kings.
No
you know, and
conspiracy there.
and then
God damn it.
Nothing
God-
going
God-
on with that one.
God damn it, John.
Ralph Nader even stepped up and was like,
and
"We
then
need
the
to
other one
investigate
was
this."
when you got to see, just because of history, like I would throw in there, and I think you might be right, but these are the ones that come to mind, is that Celtics Lakers.
Blazers, like,
Celtics Lakers, I think, is 09, where you get to see Pierce Pierce and Kobe,
Yeah.
and that was just the tradition of those two.
Well,
coming
and those
from,
are
like, that
also
was-
those are also higher stakes. Like the two that we mentioned was conference
Right.
finals and finals, not semis. So
Well, we
Right.
got
The-
some
the
Texas
Spurs
bias.
the Spurs are constantly criticized for never going back to back. That 06 year, if they do take care of the Mavs, maybe
Yeah.
that's the
That's
missing
the
puzzle for a three-peat.
Who was
Yeah,
who
Right?
was the-
05,
who was from
06,
the East?
07? The Heat. That's Dwayne Wade's.
It was the first.
The first
Yeah,
year
it was
of
the
the
first.
three?
It was the first big three.
Spurs probably win
Yeah.
that. Spurs probably win that. I don't know why. I mean,
So
I would say if you play that 10 times, the Spurs win 7.
here's my big hot take from all of this. I'm gonna give me a second to script this, but so Steve Kerr was the announcer of this game. Steve Kerr has had the greatest complete basketball resume career of all time.
Nope.
That guy. So let me give my thing, and then you can say I'm wrong.
You're forgetting someone.
Steve Kerr was a championship player. He played on the greatest dynasty maybe of all time in the Bulls, and he played on the second greatest, I would say the second greatest dynasty of all time in the San Antonio Spurs. He is going to go down as the winningest coach in regular season history. He's run 3 championships. He was the GM of the Phoenix Suns, where they went very far, and I think he might be. He's one of my favorite announcers I've ever listened to. I'd say he's top 2, top 3.
Yeah.
You're forgetting someone.
So that was when I watched him. That's my take, is that if I had to pick someone that has the full effect I'm going Steve
just
Kerr.
guessing because I haven't looked this up either, but I'm just assuming that he also probably did pretty well in high school and college.
Yes,
as well.
Arizona, he won a national
Yeah,
championship.
That's what I was going to say.
Arizona, he won a
That's what I was
national
going to say. I
championship.
thought he won a national championship
He
in
did.
Arizona. So
Yeah.
Anybody got someone else? Because I'm pretty
let's
sure I can.
So
get
here
let's
are
hear
my-
this shit, Johnny.
Here are my other people. If you have someone too. So Larry Bird to
Danny
me is up
Ainge.
there. Danny
Ainge.
Ainge just had he wasn't
Ainge.
the announcer.
Did Danny Ainge get punched in the face by Michael Jordan? I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll give him a point. Danny Ainge.
Danny Ainge is up there. Let me go
gotta
off
look at his high
who's the
school
best
and
people?
stuff
Larry
there.
Bird, Danny Ainge,
Jordan.
Steve Kerr. No, that got to do multiple things. I'm gonna
Yeah, he never coached.
I'm
He
gonna
just
go
went
with
straight
this.
to
I'm gonna
ownership.
say something about
That's
this
fine.
that backs up the current. And then so you have these guys. Phil Jackson has been able to do all this stuff. There's one guy who's an outlier a little bit, but what of all the people we've named are white. You can talk about some of the race relations of how like front offices allow certain people to look a certain way.
Jordan owns a team, by the way.
Jordan's a little different, and he's done.
Magic.
So
Magic's-
Magic has
but he wasn't
failed.
success-
Magic has
yeah,
failed.
yeah, yeah.
The best person you can put up in this conversation is Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers was a great player. He's been a great coach, and he was the GM and coach of the Clippers and made some really good decisions in the short time he was
Dude,
there.
Danny Ainge on the Celtics team that can be arguably one of the best ever. He was a sixth
He's
man
filled
to a
two roles.
starter. He was going to be drafted in the top 10 in baseball, or he was. He was like a three-sport
Talking
like
about
all
basketball.
Talking
American.
basketball, Johnny.
But I'm just saying, overall, the stuff he's done, he's been successful at. He's put together these teams that have won championships. Look what he's done with the Celtics. It's unbelievable.
Proven winner.
Okay, so
And
let's
on
talk
every
about
aspect. And he
those
went
two.
to Phoenix and was
You
in
can-
his later days on a really good team that
You
almost
can-
beat the Bulls.
Who had the better playing career, Steve Kerr or Danny Ainge?
Oh, Danny Ainge.
Okay,
It's not
okay, so he
close.
gets one thing. Who was the better announcer? Oh, Steve Kerr.
Steve
Are we
Kerr.
sure Danny Ainge has never been an announcer?
But Steve Kerr's
We
better.
never even heard about it.
Let's
so.
say Steve Kerr's announcing. Steve Kerr's announcing is comparable to the GMing. And then Steve Kerr he's going to be considered a top 7 coach historically, just based on what he's done. He's done something
Okay.
that no one else.
But a GM that has put those pieces together, still has draft picks, has just done an unbelievable. Probably maybe the best GM.
Nobody's taking anything away from
who's
Danny
the
we
best?
think Danny Ainge is a great GM.
We just
I don't
think
think
that Steve
anyone.
Kerr's resume is a bit more diverse.
I don't know.
Because I was
about
gonna
that.
say
A little
another. I don't think he beats Kerr because he hasn't. I don't think he's been a GM or a coach for that matter. He's just kind of a resident crazy person now. But Bill Walton has had a hell of a career too. That's
interesting.
That's an NBA
Interesting.
MVP. And
Had the best college career.
His
and
playing,
a
his
college
playing
career.
puts
No.
him over the top on that. That's
And he's just like crazy. Like people shake their
He's
head
announced
when they
for a
hear.
long
he's-
that's a great wild
He's
card.
and I mean he's definitely smoked more weed than both of those guys. So
Steve Kerr, I don't know, man. He had some bad back stuff.
Yeah,
he
he
had some
started
really
to.
bad back stuff.
You need to look up Danny Ainge's high school career. It's
Oh
legendary.
god. Okay, so Danny Ainge's high school career is gonna flip
Legendary.
the thing. It's
Hey,
like Danny
it's-
Ainge's high
we-
school
we
career.
were
Steve
at-
Kerr's announcing.
It's
like,
legendary.
uh,
What's announcing?
Hey,
Who-
we were at
who-
your
who's
house.
announcing?
we were at your house earlier, but I feel like there's probably a giant Danny Ainge poster there that we
no,
missed
no,
somewhere.
absolutely.
I heard-
Absolutely there are.
I heard this argument from someone else because of how good he was at the 3 sports. Like his baseball, he would have been.
Oh,
a
he's up there.
top-
He's top 3.
he
I
would-
just think
he
Steve
would've been a
Kerr,
top
like you just
10
look at
draft pick or something.
think of the stories. Like one, Steve Kerr is a really cool dude, and his activism for people's rights are
How many
it's
championships does he
pretty
have?
cool.
Like
But
8?
yeah, you think about it. Like think about that. He was part of the
6.
Bulls dynasty. He's a part of the Warriors dynasty and the Spurs dynasty.
Fought Jordan.
Like, dude, like
Well,
the
And
things.
by
he's-
fought, I mean took one to the chin.
Yeah.
But I mean he
Hey.
fought Michael Jordan.
Okay, here's my other. I don't think this is a hot take. This is just something I charted when I was watching. We really have under talked about Dirk and Duncan's greatness on here, and I think that's almost assumed. And I know Sean wants to do a Duncan thing. Watching Dirk shot, I know as a Spurs fan, I remember how helpless, and it made me think of and chart the 3 shots were at end of a game. You know it's coming. What are the 3 most unguardable shots in NBA history? My number 1 is Kareem's skyhook, where it's just like one of those. We're watching like when he needed it, he could get it off for a double team. My number 2 is Dirk's. Is
Yeah.
Dirk shot and then Dream Shake and then the Harden step back. Like those are the shots like you
The
think
Harden
about
travel
NBA
back?
history. Like so we can
Travel
make, but it's
back.
like those shots it's just those are make or miss
That's-
shots.
I try to tell people even back then, like when you're a kid talking shit about basketball, like nobody would ever say that Dirk is like an intimidating defender, but at that time in his prime on offense, that guy is just as unstoppable on offense as Kobe, as anybody else in the league at that time, because it's like you could play perfect defense, but at the end of the day, if you put Duncan on him or if you put somebody his size on him, they're too slow or they can't come all the way out. And if you put a small guy on him, he's not afraid to get in the block.
Sean, I'm gonna open the floor for you to talk a little Tim Duncan. My big Duncan take, other than the fact that he's just incredible, is I forgot that Duncan once played without knee braces. It was really cool to see both of his kneecaps. But just talk to us a little bit about some of your impressions from Tim Duncan.
It's not fair. I didn't want to sit here and compare careers between Duncan and
Sean's been waiting for this the whole time.
I didn't want to bring up the fact that one of them had 2 MVPs and Dirk only had 1, or one of them had 5 championships and Dirk only had 1. I didn't want to bring all this stuff up.
The quadruple double.
The quadruple double. You can throw that in there as well. But
Born in America.
I will say this: watching that game again, with more basketball knowledge and experience under my belt, coaching now, I'm not really fair to Dirk throughout his career.
This is my best friend. This is a huge victory. He's never said this.
Wait. It's just not fair that he had to play in the shadow of Tim Duncan his whole career.
The Tim Duncan era.
And so, but Dirk, flawless, man. He played on a great team. I think that Mavs team, I think even if you inject them today, I think they're still good.
I think they're better today.
They could be better. They could be better. They'll shoot more threes.
But like their offense, they were relentless. That first quarter, like they came out and made a statement in that game.
Yep.
And to the Spurs' credit, they never backed down. They played like the defending champs. They didn't. They were down 20 points in the first half.
Mavs started 13 for 15 from the field.
Maybe 24. There was a weird stretch, and they had talked about it in the pregame where Avery's like, we got to go to the basket, right? And so they get up, they're going to the basket, and then all of a sudden, it's like a 20-point game or 22, and there was a chance that they could have stepped on their throat. And I think if you went and asked Dirk watching, he'd be like, I should have went to the basket there. He settled for a fadeaway. It was like 3 misses in a row. Spurs get back to like 16. And all of a sudden, instead of being that 25 where you're like, this is over, we're more super comfortable, it went right back to that little, we're in striking distance.
Yeah. Did y'all think when you were watching this game that you were watching a Tony Parker that was 1 year out of being the finals MVP? Right?
I expected more from
I hate
Manu.
the fact that Tony got that MVP over Tim Duncan. But
hate it. He didn't deserve it at all.
We watched the whole game, and we watched the game in Spanish. And it was
Nice.
anytime he would do
Nice.
Tony Parker.
We might
it
actually
was great.
post that link.
Yeah,
right?
we'll post that link. Says
I'll post the English version if you want to hear Steve Kerr.
Yeah, you guys,
the greatest overall career.
You guys don't need to watch
I'm
it in
gonna go
English.
get some Danny Ainge
Nice.
info later.
So let me throw y'all this at y'all. Okay, so Timmy's stat line for the game was 41, 15, and 6. That 41 comes with being doubled every time he touched it to start the first quarter and the first 5 minutes of the third quarter.
Avery knew what he was doing.
41, 15, and 6. Like that is an incredible stat line. You take for granted. He's one of those guys that he put up 41, 15, and 6, and I didn't think it was some spectacular dunking game. It's just what he does. He did what like it was fun to see, like, oh, Tim at one point in the third quarter had a big and one where he like ripped through one of their, like, I think it was Jason Terry, and he
some
did
emotion.
a huge fist bump in the third quarter. I was like, I've never seen a Tim Duncan third quarter fist bump. I was like, this game, like, he knew that was the time where he had to make that run. I always compare like Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan was that guy. He didn't always get the last shot, which I hated, but Tim Duncan was the run killer. Tim Duncan and Klay Thompson, the two guys that I've seen throughout my sports life, like, they're the ultimate second and third quarter guys. Like, if I don't do something here, we're going to lose this game. There's going to be no chance of clutch. Like, Tim Duncan scores 14 in the third. It reminded me of what Tim Duncan done over and over and over, and Klay does over and over and over again.
Kids need to see some of these old games, man, because a lot of the kids that, like, you know, kids Sean's coaching now, guys that you've coached in college, like kids that Johnny and I that we come across, it's like they see most of these guys on their way out. Like, they've seen them in their twilight years where they're just like veteran leaders. Yeah. And it's like, man, if you catch these guys in the early 2000s, like mid 2000s, look out. Shit.
There's a big, and y'all know I hate him, but I think LeBron's one of the best run stoppers.
Yeah.
He kind of, it's weird. I don't like LeBron, right? I think he's like, to me, a little bit like Magic, but better version of Magic and can shoot threes. But man, he can sense, like, you can see, he'll just put his head down, go to the basket 3 times in a row, get to the free throw line. He can it's weird. He's like a coach out there, can sense it, and he'll be like, and Duncan, I think they're just like Pop will be like, God dang it, there's a run.
Yeah.
Give Duncan the ball.
Yeah.
Tony Parker. Oh crap.
We're-
Give Duncan give Duncan the ball.
We're about to switch over to our last thing. Just want to give each one of y'all to give y'all like a couple of closing thoughts here of this before we go on to the next thing. My one was how big of a difference changing an offensive rebound to 14 to 24 seconds, how much that changes pace and quality of play, like the end of games, an offensive rebound for the offense, like
I
the
don't
team that's
like that
winning.
rule.
I just think that if you like it or don't, it changes the game.
I don't like
And then the second thing was late in the fourth quarter, watching Pop sprint to the baseline when Keith Van Horn was guarding Tim Duncan was one of my favorite little like Greg Pop still had some speed back in the day that so those are my two closing things that I saw that so Sean, I'll throw it on to you.
Yeah, I think to me the biggest difference maker was the bench again, and I won't elaborate into too much detail, but Brent Berry, you had it coming. You had it coming.
Oh gosh, shit.
Shout out Tony Parker.
Oh yeah.
Johnny.
I still don't understand how two guys can line up on the baseline during a
Oh,
free
yeah,
throw.
I'm glad you brought
and,
up. Way to
and the
bring it up.
ref just points at him like violation. Okay, shoot your free throw. Oh, that guy ran in 2 seconds early.
If you're
is
trying to
that
see,
thing
if you're
happens?
trying to see on the YouTube clip of Johnny
It's
talking about
insane.
22 seconds left in the fourth quarter after Dirk Sand won, this is the plays looking at. Check it and give us your feedback.
God,
on
it
that.
makes no
This
sense.
is Ginobili's foul, right?
This is Ginobili's
Yes,
coming
on
over. We didn't
and
really
one.
talk. Well, we actually JB talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
That Ginobili soft foul on the and one. But JB, you got closing thoughts before we move on to our final segment?
Man, my closer would just be remember some of these guys, man, because
Absolutely.
it's easy to remember the legends, but I don't think the average viewer or the average fan understands how good you've got to be at that level on one of the elite teams. And it's like, I mean, there were guys that Dirk's going to do his thing, Duncan's going to do his thing. The Spurs' big three were a thing by then, but guys on both teams that you don't really hear about anymore. It's like it's nice to watch some of these old games and see that Josh Howard was a dude, Jason Terry was a dude, and you see why they were in the league.
Did y'all expect? I expected more from Manu. I know I've watched that game, but rewatching it, I remember watching Manu like 2 years ago and thinking, God, this guy still got it. 2 years ago.
He's wild card,
He
Johnny.
didn't do
Yeah,
that
he
much.
is
Like
wild.
he, what do you have? Like
You're
17 points?
you're like our Manu.
Oh, he finished.
You're
he
like
finished
our
in
you're
20.
the
Well,
wild card.
20.
I think it's good. JB's point talking about Josh Howard and what a pain he was, and all I can do before our last segment is talk about if you're having pain, stress, anxiety, PTSD, insomnia. Please go to Natural Heights and CBD Oil. You're gonna have to pick them up outside now, but they're still open. Call them at 210-592-1060. That's 1880 Nacogdoches Road, and go get you some CBD oil.
Yee.
So our closing segment, it's going to be things to keep yourself busy during COVID-19, aka Donald Trump and Johnny's great hoax. We'll start off with
Think it's real.
we'll start off with something that we know Trump wouldn't agree on. That's reading books. So any books?
I got a great book.
You got a good one,
I got a
Johnny. We'll start
great
you off.
book.
Let's go around the horn.
Real simple. Look what's happening. All this stuff. You need to read 1984.
We start with the book title. Okay, there you go.
You read 1984.
I don't know how I feel about Johnny shouting out my favorite fucking book right now.
You have to read that book. You have to. If you
I
see
agree.
what's going on now, you have to read that book
Fair enough.
and realize where things are going.
JB.
Right now, I'd
Reread
say
it.
21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Harari. It's if you read it, a lot of it.
Is that a Japanese guy?
No, he's Israeli. But
Harari.
he wrote. He's the same author that wrote 'Sapiens and Homo Deus. But yeah,
I'll have to
it's
read one of those.
relevant. I'll keep it at that. But yeah, anything by Yuval Noah Harari.
Right now, I've actually got *Sapiens* downloaded thanks to JB's recommendation. But right now, I'm reading *Talking to Strangers* by Malcolm Gladwell. I personally recommend anything Malcolm
Sounds like
Gladwell
a terrible
writes.
idea right now with Corona. By
but,
the way. Talking to strangers.
Talking to
Ridiculous,
Strangers
man.
is a book basically talking about how we assume right, and you have to see enough in someone's lives to actually trust that they're a liar. It's a really interesting book. It's a almost like a psycho analytical type thing. So if you're into that kind of stuff, I really recommend that.
Nice. Well, I've been filling most of my COVID-19 time with with Netflix and not Tiger King.
Damn
Justin. Yeah, I refuse to watch Tiger King.
Sean refuses, and I've tried to get him to,
We're
but
gonna have to hijack.
So
your
do you want to
Netflix
start us
account.
with our Netflix?
Yeah, I'll start with the
Rex? Yeah,
Netflix.
go with that.
This morning, I just finished up season 1, so 2020. It's called Caliphate. It's about modern terrorism. It's casted in Sweden, right?
yeah,
Justin?
yeah.
Yeah, it's entirely in Swedish, so you're gonna have to get the English dub version. But it's about modern terrorism and radicalization. It's pretty good series. About eight episodes or first season in, but it's pretty good watch. Caliphate.
Up-
My
Up for you. I don't know if it's on Netflix. It's called.
you're about to have
it's
a
called Upgrade.
recommendation. We're going. It'll be your turn.
Upgrade. No, I'm just saying. I haven't been watching my Netflix. If it's on
My-
there, Upgrade is good.
My Netflix show. I'm a little behind, but Narcos Mexico is
I've been
awesome.
watching-
So if you've had your head in the sand like I'm with you on Tiger King, I kind of refuse to watch things that are extremely
Bastards.
popular. It's not even cool, but
the
I
memes look pretty. I will say this.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. But the memes.
Memes are at an
Yeah.
elite level
the
right now
Tiger
with
King
COVID.
of the Hill. I
Oh.
thought that
and
was pretty
JB,
good.
we know your show, so you can go ahead and pitch the hell
Well,
out
man,
of, out of the,
first
the
of
Tiger
all,
King.
let me tell you guys, I too wanted to hold back from it, and I think that in any other time, if we weren't in a pandemic, maybe I've never seen Tiger King, but I have. It's
Bad
absolutely it has everything. So for most of our listeners will have seen it. It's got everything. So just imagine if you haven't seen it, it's got a gay redneck, wild animals, a rivalry between wild animal zoos, intrigue and crime. So it's got a little bit of a game of like a redneck weirdo Game of Thrones
Tiger-
feel.
Tiger
Yeah.
of Thrones.
I love it.
Throne of
It's
Tigers.
got a murder plot. It's got cops. Shaq is even in it
Something
from
for
the
everyone.
basketball thing,
Yeah.
Wow.
and polygamy, gay and heterosexual and homosexual polygamy. So it's one of those things. It's so awful you can't take your eyes away from it.
I thought you said the left agenda wasn't that strange.
Yeah, it's nuts. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of those things you don't want to watch, but eventually you run out of shit to watch. Before this, I finished Kingdom. It's basically Korean zombies Korean 17th century zombies
Nice.
is what
you guys are getting a array. Johnny,
What's Johnny's
Well-
not, doesn't even have Netflix.
well-
what are we gonna watch here?
Upgrade. I don't know how you get it. It's really good near future science fiction dealing with AI. Really good and
Upgrade.
hyper violent, like stuff where I saw it, I go
You
I
have
can't
my
believe-
attention.
borderline. It was so bad. I was like, wow, this was weird, like disturbingly violent.
Disturbingly violent.
Yes.
so if you don't
But-
like violence,
But done very
upgrades
good.
not. But if you do like it, that's your thing.
We only promote violent shit on this podcast. So
The second one is called In Time. It's a little bit older with Justin Timberlake, and you would like the theory of it. It's you're given amount of time to live up until like 18. Your clock starts, and people trade in time instead of
Nice.
money. So rich people live forever. Poor people like literally are trading food for.
that's
money.
pretty
It's
that's
really
pretty
good. In
interesting.
Time. And
What are you
Justin
watching
Timberlake.
that on right now?
I actually bought Upgrade on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
In Time, I might have rented it on Amazon Prime, but I watched that a while ago. But that's really good.
guys, if any of Johnny's suggestions seem too difficult, just do what I will probably do and illegally stream it.
Yep, that's the way to do it.
Any so next
Wait, this is when you do the waiver. I'm just
This is just a persona. This is just a podcast persona. I'm not actually going to do that.
Yeah.
so old movie, documentary, anything that you've watched recently or planning to watch that you think is really good, Johnny. We'll just circle back around the horn.
Leave me for last. I have to look it up. This is
Okay.
This is a
All
game
right.
changer
All right,
documentary.
JB, you can start, and then we'll roll through.
I would say I actually started rewatching this with Sean the other day. It's called Who Killed Malcolm X. Pretty cool. It's a small.
I'm a fan of Malcolm X, by the way.
It's a small docu-series it's like an independent guy. I think he works as he's a tour guide for Arlington National Cemetery, but he's African American Muslim, and just becomes obsessed with kind of getting to the bottom of it, because not a lot of people know that only one of the actual 5 assassins were actually arrested, and then the 2 guys did like 20 years and were wrongfully convicted. And so it's just about him getting to the bottom of it, and it's pretty cool. It gives a historical perspective. The MLK stuff is very well documented, and there's a bunch of theories around that. But Malcolm X, I think, is not quite as much. So it's cool to see.
I'm gonna go with just a mainstream movie that's been around for a while, but I rewatched and just you got some of the peak performance on that. It's Good Will Hunting. You've got you know Robin Williams. Just remember how
Como
good
te
he was.
gusta esta manzanas?
Yeah, you got
That's how
Ben
you- that's how you
Affleck,
say it
who's,
in
and then
Spanish.
Matt Damon.
I
and
work at a school as a janitor.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
just
I'll walk by a chalkboard and see a problem.
how do you like them apples? It's
Como te gusta esta manzanas?
you're gonna it's a
Come on,
fun
man.
it's a fun show to watch. I
Learn
would
how to
I would
say it in
recommend it if
Spanish.
you're like trying to just chill out and watch a movie. It's some great
not
acting.
Your
So
fault.
that's mine.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
Hey,
Let's hug.
Johnny
now.
likes this movie too. All right,
It's a decent.
My one of my favorite documentaries. Also, it's HBO documentary, Class Divide. Is made like maybe 5 years ago. It's about socioeconomic classes in New York City and gentrification. If you have access to like HBO Go or what do they call it? HBO On Demand or HBO Go?
HBO Go.
HBO
Yeah,
Go.
check out Class
Got it right the
Divide.
first time.
Yeah, it is a real deal. It's pretty good.
This is literally the most important documentary I think I've ever seen, except for Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist was pretty good. That opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. This one is called The Occupation of the American Mind. There is a reference to Trump in this and his Apprentice show. And there's another show that's different than it that's mentioned in this, but it's called The Occupation of the American Mind. Go watch that documentary. It's about 1 hour and 30 minutes long. You will be amazed after watching it.
This is a special moment. I mean, this is the first Escape Pod
That's right.
cast, and yeah, man, this is special. We've done our first ever thing. We've been doing this for a bit.
Shout out
but-
to Alex.
yeah, shout out to
Alex.
shout out to
from
Alex
Romania.
in Romania. He's a part of this crew.
Yeah.
He just lives in Bucharest, Romania, so
Do you
San
watch-
Antonio's a
do
bit
y'all
far.
watch Workaholics?
Yeah.
Okay, so in Workaholics at the end, they always have the guy that's not in any of the shows, but he's just like there at the end in the credits.
Yeah,
That's Alex. You're
Alex.
there,
Yeah,
Alex. You're
Alex
just
is
here.
here.
Before we have one last thing, and we're gonna let one of you guys send us out. I've got music album or podcast you want to plug for people that if you've got anything, I'll go first. I've got a couple. Podcast Greenlight with Chris Long. Chris Long is hilarious. Johnny, you probably wouldn't. Might be a little too liberal for your liking. Defensive end for the New England Patriots, Rams, and Philadelphia Eagles.
Howie Long's son.
Howie Long's son. Yeah,
Okay.
super sharp dude, hilarious. I would Greenlight with Chris Long, and then I was listening to the old Blueprint 3 by Jay-Z. Solid album if you're trying to listen to some oldies but goodies. And then a couple of my players put me on Lost Boy by YBN. So a couple of music choices to listen to. If y'all have got any podcasts or music to plug.
Mind the Moon album by Milky Chance. Actually, just before all of the Corona madness hit the world, I got to see them in Stockholm, which it's nice when you follow a band for years and years that you finally get to go see them. So yeah, Mind the Moon, Milky Chance.
Nice. No new music. I guess I'm still listening to Mac Miller's. Yeah, I'm still on Mac Miller's stuff, man. I won't let it stop. I won't let him die.
R.I.P. man.
Y'all Rick and Morty fans?
Hell,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Okay,
dude.
so on Rick and Morty, there's an episode where like Rick is just losing faith and everything, and they make him listen to this guy called Elliott Smith, who has some really good
yeah.
old music.
Hey, that's emotional
And
shit, Johnny.
that dude
Is this season 4?
killed himself by stabbing himself in the heart with a
Exactly.
knife.
Seen season
yeah,
4 yet.
yeah, that's true. I think either 3 or 4.
We're only on season 4, and they only have like.
Oh,
I'm saying
it's-
the
is that
Elliott
when
Smith,
it's-
the Elliott Smith
is
episode?
that-
Though,
Oh.
it's season 3, I think.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Is that when he turned into little Kid Rick? When he
And they
kills the
tried to say
vampire?
maybe-
It's in the same
And they
season.
put the
maybe.
music on his earphones,
yeah,
and he's
yeah.
like, "Why do?" Okay,
That's Elliott
So
Smith.
that's the
Okay.
first time I ever
Got it.
heard of Elliott Smith.
Another
And
show, obviously, you can go watch is Rick and Morty.
Then I started listening to his music. One
Oh,
of his good
it's deep.
songs is Whatever.
Yeah.
So shout out to Whatever. And then there's one, as soon as you see him, his most popular song will come up. But he's
So we've given
legit.
you the Rex. We've given you all the options. JB,
Man,
Close out.
these are crazy times. I know we're here drinking beer and being funny or trying to be funny. Who knows? But these are serious times. Stay in your goddamn house and just relax. Keep your distance when you can. I think in the next couple of weeks, man, we're going to be seeing some really unfortunate news from around the country. So just try to love the people close to you, but love them at a distance, and stay out of the bars if there are any bars open, and keep just wait it out till this thing's over, man.
only place you can drink is airport private bars. I've paid for 2 memberships
Oh,
while
sh-
traveling
oh,
lately.
sh-
So
oh,
I've been
shit.
drinking in bars. Pretty cool.
That's episode 1 of Escape Pod. See you guys next Wednesday at 7:45.